history of evolution has taught us. It's that life will not be contained. Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but, well, there it is. There it is.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
And that was a clip from 1993's Jurassic Park. This is Jordan, and this is Movies the Podcast, and tonight I'm joined by...
Curtis.
Rob.
Jenny.
And our ever-amazing producer, Stan, Dan the Man.
Jackie Chan.
This is Jackie Chan.
That's racist. You'll fit in nicely here. So we are joined tonight by Ginny in place of Brenda. Brenda is not with us tonight, so we give a shout-out to her. And,
she's a little under the weather, so hopefully she gets... Oh, by the time this airs, she'll be...
Hopefully she's better by the time this airs.
We were going to have Jenny anyways.
Yeah.
We lucked out.
We adopted her.
Yeah.
But Ginny is here, and Ginny is bringing an interesting perspective on movies. She's the writer of a blog called I Went Yesterday, which focuses on women in film. Ginny, can you tell us a little bit about your blog and what you write?
I just feel like there's not enough information out there about women in film from a woman's perspective. So I decided to write a blog based off of the Natalie Wood quote. It's someone asked her, what do you want? What do you need today? And she said, I want yesterday. And that was right before she died. So I thought it was somber.
It's a somber tone. We appreciate that.
What she needed was swimming lessons.
Oh!
No, it is not too soon for Natalie Wood. I'm sorry. What Wood doesn't float?
It was 30
Natalie
years
Wood.
ago.
Was it only 30 years ago?
30 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
30 years, yeah.
That's so weird.
I know what she's talking about on her blog tonight. Misogyny, the podcast.
I met this homosexual, and what he said just...
Who's gay?
Oh,
Curtis.
yes, that's right.
You know
So we
it.
are here tonight. So we are very glad to have Ginny tonight, and we'll...
Thank you, Jenny, for coming.
Thank you.
we will try to be nice and not run you out. And screaming and yelling halfway through. So before we get started...
We'll just edit it.
That's true. We'll dub in.
We've learned, yeah.
But before we start with tonight's featured topic, what has everyone been up to?
Well, I think we've all pretty much have caught a little bit of the new Arrested Development season.
Yes.
Yes, I have.
Yes, and like herpes, it's hard to cure. Really uncomfortable.
God.
Yeah.
I want to like it. I always tell Rob every time we talk about it, I want to like it. I want to think it's the funniest show I've ever seen. I want to tee-hee all the way, but it's just not funny to me, and it's just not my...
Now, are you a fan of the original seasons?
Ish. Like, I liked them. I think they're good. I watched them. I was like, oh, this is funny. Like, this is good. But no, I wasn't like, oh my God, they're coming back. But I watched it, and to me, it's just the same of the old.
I was one of the hardcore, can't wait that it's coming back. I've been posting
too.
memes for weeks.
Oh, really?
I have been so
The
excited.
Bluth a Day.
Bluth a Day. There's an app that you could text one of the characters and they would text you the minute that Netflix released the episodes.
Aw, did they all text you?
Nerd. But I was really disappointed. I don't even think disappointed is the word. I think aghast.
It fell flat.
It was. They jumped the shark, then went back and raped the shark.
I disagree. I don't think they jumped the
culture.
shark. I don't think they've jumped the shark. I enjoy it.
They ran it over with stair
But what do you mean by jump the shark? They took it.
Did
I
somebody
think it's
slip in the phrase rape culture in there?
No.
Someone has to speak for Brenda. I'm sorry. And
What do you
I will
mean?
be that voice.
What do you mean jump the shark though? Because jump the shark means they've taken it too far. I feel like they're doing the same old shtick they did
Yeah.
before.
No, because I think the pattern is different.
The structure.
That's
The
the
structure
paycheck.
is different, but the structure was what was amazing about the original.
True.
But
there was that pattern. and there was
if
that
you had read what they were
signature.
doing, is that each of them is meant to be a catch-up of where these characters have been, leading up to a potential movie. So it's one of those where they're once again taking that gamble as they did in the previous seasons. We're hoping we're going to continue the series.
I would not watch that movie.
I honestly.
I totally would.
Well, I think, and this is an interesting article, I think it was on Hollywood Reporter, I was telling Rob about it. Their pay structure is very curious, and the way Netflix has budgeted them, there's a star of each episode, and that star gets the paycheck. And then if you notice, the other cast members are in it for about 90 seconds. They get a small paycheck just for appearing in the episode. So it's a budget thing. I think that's the way it's structured the way it is, which is kind of sad in a way, but kind of, I guess, how the industry works now. But it does make a difference.
It's a different industry. I mean, Netflix is unique in the way it's like they did with House of Cards. They did with what's that horror one?
Hemlock Grove.
It's a new way of approaching a series that doesn't.
And it's interesting to see that there's a double-edged sword with that new production environment.
It's not just total freedom.
That it's not that total freedom can go one way or the other. That, I'm going to finish the episodes, and I will.
I mean, I will. I've got nothing else to watch.
I'm sure I'm going to watch them again after I watch them.
Yeah, I've only watched 3. I just didn't want to continue it, but I'm going to because I love that show so much. But I don't know, watching 3 was enough for me right now, unfortunately.
Well, and that's probably why they asked everybody not to binge watch it. And again, I don't understand.
Then don't release them that way.
Well,
Netflix.
Dan, you never have an opinion.
I know, right? But no, as a guy who watched the entire thing because I'm fat and lazy, I got to episode 7, and I know that's like the cool thing to say. Episode 7's when it got better, but seriously, that's when it got better. It gets better, guys.
Thank you for telling me now.
Out of high school.
But wait, Dan, is that when the characters start really coming together as an ensemble? Because that's when it started to work.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's when kind of everybody does their first episode, and then you really start understanding why there's a big time gap. I guess everything kind of goes back in time and then forward in time.
Yeah.
And you start seeing them interact as a family, which is why the show works. Is because not one of them are a solid lead. All together is a perfect show.
Yep. Jason Bateman. He's a solid lead. He's your character that you watch. But
you notice without the ensemble, he turns into a total douchebag.
What?
But you didn't notice when he was
does.
immersed in the ensemble.
Because he's not the douchebag. He's the guy who's trying to save everything. Oh, that does make sense.
So
it's like watching a half an hour of Jack
That makes
and
me
Karen.
sad.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean,
It's
just
too
look at the
much.
relationship. Sorry, we're
Go
talking over each other unintentionally. What else?
I know that one thing I watched was Behind the Candelabra on HBO.
I just watched it last night.
So good. There were some things that were a little off, and you could definitely tell it was Soderbergh. But because halfway through, I was like, "Is it supposed to look like this?" Oh yeah, it's Soderbergh.
The yellow light.
It's supposed it's always washed out, and people are at a distance, and
Curtis and I were
people that
watching
are
it
close
last
are
night.
out of focus, and it's just
Right when Matt Damon was in the end was kind of poor and he had the yellow lighting, I was like, he uses the same lighting in Magic Mike. And they were like, because he's poor, and that's his poor lighting. Like,
oh yeah, it's like the
Soderbergh's
mood
lighting. Like anytime you want to identify someone as a poor character, the lighting's yellow.
Aaron Brockovich had
Aaron
yellow
Brockovich.
lighting in Magic Mike, the sister, and
I haven't
In
watched
Traffic, the
Soderbergh.
Mexico scenes were all in yellow. Like
that's
the drug
right.
cartel scenes were yellow.
here's the thing I'll say about Candelabra. I doubt you'll see a better male performance from those two. Matt Damon had the harder role because it's more subtle, but I think, Michael Douglas had a really hard role. It was the best I've ever seen him.
Well, also Matt Damon's 40 playing.
But he
19,
did so good
but he
playing.
Did he did really well.
I
The makeup
bought it.
in the film was.
I think they CG'd his face.
because they had
Probably.
to show.
He's kind of soft.
They had to show the aging between, you meet. What's his name? Liberace. You meet Liberace.
Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas' story, but they changed the names to Liberace
and Scott.
and Scott. Hello.
But
Wait,
can we
is she
agree
Australian?
that Rob Lowe's character was?
Lowe's in it? He's
Fascinating.
hilarious.
Well, first of all, when I first saw Rob Lowe come on screen, I said, "My God, Lauren Bacall looks amazing. She has held up well."
He had... How did
His
he...
character was meant to be like the go-to plastic surgeon of the time, so he had all this work. His character just plays up the fact that he's had all this work done. The makeup on
He
him.
ended up looking like Lady Elaine from
He-
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood,
No,
the little
he
rosy
did.
cheek. He was just like, he looked
He
like
had
a puppet.
Nobby.
It was, and it got progressively worse throughout the movie. Like, he completely lost his eye. When that
He was
Liberace
so
sleeping with
good.
his eyes open thing was creepy.
Yeah. It
That
was
was
it was a
good.
well-acted movie.
It was.
I just wouldn't say it's a great movie.
But the
Right.
biggest thing that I was disappointed by is like it wasn't relatable at all.
There's
Like,
no character you were like...
Did you think that you would find many things in the Liberace love-death story?
But even
that-
in all those biopics, there's somebody where you're like...
you're rooting for?
Yeah. And you
This
didn't
wasn't
remember
What's Love Got to Do with it.
I know.
Scott didn't like leave the limo with a bloody eye.
He left it with a bag of cocaine and some jewelry.
I thought it was interesting though at the end. I mean, it's a true story, so people know what happened to these people. But
Heart failure.
They're
Yes.
Spoilers.
Liberace dies of AIDS. I don't know. I didn't want to ruin it for
gay.
anyone. But I thought it was interesting that they didn't really give an epilogue on what happened to Scott because he actually went to prison twice. And one of the characters from the movie, his drug dealer, was involved in the Wonderland murders and went to prison. And Scott went into witness protection because he testified against the gang from the Wonderland
I'm
murders.
obsessed with the Wonderland murders.
Yeah, so it was just interesting they didn't mention that. I know the focus was Liberace, and it wasn't really. I just thought it would be interesting that could have just,
But that would have opened the door for a lot more.
a sequel.
Oh,
Well, it was very self-contained. It was
True,
very low
true.
budget.
It was, but it was very good, and I think Michael Douglas definitely has Emmy,
But
coming
he's
his
going to be
way.
up against Kevin Spacey.
which is good
For
for
House of
people
Cards.
watching television and people like it's a good year. Like we've got these amazing
Yeah.
performances to really appreciate.
No, I completely agree. I finished Mad Men. I know we're kind of on TV, but I finally finished.
Don't say anything because I haven't finished it yet.
I'm on season 5.
he's on season 5.
I just finished season 5.
Oh,
I haven't
you've
even
got
seen
to
season
watch.
6. I know.
Oh my god!
I enjoy everything about that show, especially the women. So
Has anyone seen Star Trek? I've seen it twice in the theater now.
I've started
You've
watching
seen
the
it
original
twice now?
series.
Yeah.
You've started watching the
original
original
series?
series?
Yeah.
How much time do you have on your hands?
A lot. I'm unemployed, Rob.
God, Rob,
I wasn't trying.
I just finished school. God damn it.
can I get a job? I started the other night. I must have hit up some Franzia on the way home, and I started trying to watch Voyager. I'm like, I'm gonna watch every Voyager episode.
Nobody watched every Voyager episode.
Oh, I know
Not
people
even the
did.
cast of
There's
Voyager.
The production team like, we'll just watch it later.
Our friends Justin and Chris, they watched Next Generation, and they started Voyager, and then they stopped. And I was like, well, maybe Deep Space.
So you started the original,
Like Captain Kirk.
Shatner.
Wow.
1950.
How many seasons was that?
only 3.
4 or 5?
No, the first one was only 3.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
because they almost canceled it.
That's right.
And then brought it back just for 2 more seasons. I know, it's weird to think. It's that iconic of a show. And do you know Star Trek's only been around for 50 years?
Seems like it's.
And it
around
really just
longer.
redefined. Brady Bunch wasn't on the air very long, and it was a flop. So was Gilligan's Island. Like there are a lot of those shows.
The
that-
Monsters.
Right.
Wow, I
can-
Gilligan's Island was canceled for low ratings because
I-
nobody watched it when it
How
aired.
long can that premise really go? Well,
Gilligan's Island?
Lost.
Ever.
I don't know how many
Forever.
episodes,
It's
how many
still
seasons
good.
was lost.
This is true.
I just wanted to
That's why
find out that
Lost.
Gilligan and Ginger were going to be
But
going to
remember-
heaven together at the end.
Shows back then weren't like this deep plot. It was like Gilligan can't find the coconuts, you know. It was like that kind of stuff.
Again.
Again, Gilligan, where are the coconuts? Well, I don't know. That's my
And
accent for everybody.
that's stretched out for 30 minutes of an episode.
They do, but no, they were only like 20 something. I mean, that's how TV worked back then.
Yeah.
Now I watch 1 hour Mad Men, and when the episode ends, I'm like, what is happening? that producer does not want you to get a handle on those characters.
Well, kind of talking about Star Trek kind of leads us into our topic for the podcast tonight.
What are we talking about?
We are talking about science fiction.
I love secret topics.
Secret topics.
We didn't know that we were going to record this till tonight.
Surprise! You would think because of all the preparation I did for it that we found out 10 minutes ago that we were going on the air. I'm so glad this show isn't live.
Isn't it?
Don't get any ideas. Or that we have a studio audience that could throw things.
Easy
Um,
do it.
Oh yeah, we've talked about it.
I wanted to host science fiction because I am a sci-fi person. I'm one of those people that would describe themselves as a sci-fi geek. And I know that there are people in this room that do not describe themselves that way. So that would be interesting to have a little discussion about science fiction and the role that it has played in movies because it has been such an amazing force in movies and in literature and the literature that turns into movies. We were talking a little bit off air about science fiction and what makes science fiction science fiction. So I looked up a quote from Robert Heinlein, who's considered, he's an author and he's considered the father of science fiction. And he kind of laid out the groundwork of what is science fiction versus fantasy and what is science fiction versus what is horror. And the key to science fiction and why the science part of it comes into it is that it's always a premise that's probable. It takes a current technology, pushes it to the next step. It takes a current trend in society, pushes it to another step. it's human-based. He uses the example that if you made a movie about Earthlings being descended from Martians, that's fantasy, because that can't possibly be an extension of what we already know, because then you couldn't explain apes. You couldn't explain Earth evolution. But if you write a story about people leaving Earth and going to Mars to colonize, that's science fiction. That is an extension of something that is real in our world. And I think that's why science fiction really resonates with a lot of people, because it is something very relatable. We were talking about how science fiction really crosses genres. It's political, it's social commentary, it's comedy, it's horror, it's suspense, political theories, it's romance. And you can do so many different things with it. So I kind of wanted to throw it out to our castmates tonight. Of kind of, when I say to them, what is science fiction that you really love, or what is it that comes to mind when you think of science fiction? What is that, and what is that experience? And I think that some people listening too might begin to think of themselves as a little bit more of science fiction fans than they thought. So, Jenny, do you want to start with your pick?
I picked Blade Runner. I think it's an obvious choice, but I love that movie.
It's an obvious choice because it's a really freaking good movie.
It's still good.
Yeah, and it really holds up.
And it has really strong female characters in it, which I enjoy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, it kind of does.
It
Even
does.
and Sean Young's such a terrible actress, but I think
She's amazing in that, though.
But they know
She's
how to
amazing,
use her.
yeah.
They know how to prop her the right way. It's some sci-fi movies, not all of them, have done that, where they know an archetype and they're like, let's take you and I always forget about not the Daryl Hannah character.
Oh, the
The
snake woman.
Yes.
What's her name? I can't remember.
I know Joanna Cassidy's her name in real life, but I don't know her name.
I don't remember her character's name
But she's
either.
awesome. She kicks ass in that.
Yeah,
so.
she leaves an impression.
That movie, for the longest time, I always thought that it was famous or just so well loved because of the technology and the way it was set, when the time period it was set, and that it was groundbreaking for its special effects. And when I finally saw it, that wasn't the case at all. I mean, it had amazing set pieces. It had this
that still hold up.
But it holds up because of the story, and it just blew my mind that this movie, for me, Brazil is a movie that I'm not a huge fan of, but I think it holds up because of how visually stunning the film is. Blade Runner, to me, holds up because of the story, and you just get the satisfaction of all these visuals behind this film.
But that's what makes, good sci-fi from great sci-fi, because Blade Runner has a lot of intellectual ideas. It has a lot of poetry, for lack of a better word. It has a lot of themes that it's not just let's run from someone trying to get us, because that's where it could verge into horror. And I think, to me, that in 2001 are the best sci-fis for very different reasons.
Absolutely.
But I know, I have a friend, Justin, who loves sci-fi and does not like Blade Runner, does not find any I don't know, if he was here, he would be able to explain it better than me, but doesn't find any merit in it. So I always think it's strange when people don't like it.
It's interesting you're kind of juxtaposing those two movies, because they're very polar opposites.
Mm-hmm.
I think in sci-fi you have those movies that are very clean and crisp and
Blade Runner's so
austere,
dirty.
Yeah.
and Blade Runner's very dirty. It's gritty.
Yeah.
It's
That's
urban.
It's like the old Star Trek and the old Star Wars. Star Wars Trek was very clean, and Star Wars was very dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, it's different. It's all the same. But
Yeah. Rob, what was something that you had thought of when we threw that out?
I think there's a lot of great sci-fi films, and like Curtis said, there's films that are good and some that are great. And I was making a list of films that I really enjoy that have that sci-fi element behind it, especially the way you just put that, how the difference between how sci-fi, your opinion of how sci-fi was perceived, not necessarily your opinion, but the way you stated that. To me, I'm a big fan of, I've talked about this before, but Philip Kaufman's, it's Philip Kaufman, right?
Philip Kaufman, yeah.
Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers with, he's making
That was the one I was going to say. That's all.
Invasion of the Body
Oh,
Snatchers.
Rob just had me watch that a couple months ago.
I literally watched that just a couple months ago also.
It's phenomenal, and it scares the bejesus out of me every time. But going through the list, the original Day the Earth Stood Still, that movie holds up so beautifully. Watching that again, but to me, I think sci-fi is a genre that it can be so dismissed so easily, but it's a genre that it takes what's worked in other films, it takes what's worked in other stories, and can make it still awe-inspiring. You still can watch movies and be like the Star Trek, not the second one, but the first one.
Close Encounters.
Close Encounters. But when the remake of Star Trek came out, you knew what this world was. You knew what these characters were, especially that they're relaunching an existing franchise. But it still left you in awe what they did with it. So.
And you really, I think, you touch on what I think is very unique about science fiction, is that it's able to comment on society in a way that other genres are not able to. And you mentioned the Day the Earth Stood Still, which is a commentary on nuclear war and a commentary on environmentalism, made at a time before those voices against those movements. It's been a way throughout history for writers and directors and screenwriters and novelists to comment on society in a way that gets their message through but isn't on the nose. And that's one of the things, Star Wars really tapped a nerve in '77 when it came out because of, corruption in the government. You had,
but I don't think that's why it tapped the nerve.
I think so. I think it really
I think what it...
Well, it was escapist, but it is escapist with a point.
With a point.
Kind of like Aliens or something like that.
And, and I just went to recently in Houston, we had Galacticon 3, because it was my first con to ever go to, and it was amazing.
Nerd.
Battlestar Galactica fans. And I met Edward James Olmos, and that was amazing. Speaking of Blade Runner.
Now?
Oh, he wasn't standing.
Yeah, he was in Blade Runner. He was Gaff. And Zora is
Zora.
Joanna Cassidy's name. But one of the points he made, and a lot of the speakers that we went to these panels were talking about, is that something like Battlestar Galactica, which is a TV show, and on the surface it's people shooting each other in space, and it's corny romantic lines, but it came out really at the beginning of the Iraq War, and it really spoke to that commentary that was going on in America about trusting your government, trusting each other, terror that looks like you, and those kinds of those very subtle things that were spoken to, and it wasn't on the nose, and they didn't say this is exactly like Bush going into Iraq. It was very, very subtle, and I think that does resonate with people, maybe even on a subconscious level.
I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad you said earlier, because the ones that I kind of thought of for sci-fi, I mean, I obviously Blade Runner and 2001 Space Odyssey are great, but I picked ones, and you made the perfect definition, or Heinlein did, that it's something that's happening now, but kind of pushed into the future. For me, and I was just asking you too, The Stepford Wives is
Yes.
wonderful. Ira Levin understood the terror, and that is kind of science fiction. It's what was happening at the time, women, feminism really making a rise, and men being so terrified.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, and then more recently, Children of Men.
Which, for sure.
We always forget how great that movie is because it kind of fell to the wayside, but it's sci-fi, right? I mean,
that is science fiction.
Takes what could happen and took it even further. So I like those, and I never really thought of them as science fiction. I just thought of them as social commentary.
I'm gonna take that from you. So I'm gonna claim Children of Men, and you can have my. What did I pick?
I adore Children of Men. I do. It's
a good movie. And
it's fantastically made.
I'll give you my Galaxy Quest. You can have that one.
Take it.
And a lot of science fiction is dystopic. It is very bleak. It's a lot about destruction and a lot about death and genocide, and Children of Men is definitely an example of a society just gone to the shitter.
Oh my God, you say that, and I'm looking through my list. I'm like, oh, AI, Independence Day, District 9. I'm like,
Sad.
Wall-E.
But I wanted to say, when we talked about sci-fi, my mind goes straight to, and I always say it's like the Tom Cruise, Steven Spielberg movies, like the Minority Report, War of the Worlds. Like,
War of the Worlds. I love the War of the Worlds.
I do. I love that. I want to say those movies, but when we started really talking about sci-fi, the ultimate is 2001 and Blade Runner.
It's very interesting too to look at.
I keep reiterating that.
We're talking about our recommendations this week are Blade Runner, which we should watch. We should screen that. That should be our next screening.
I've never seen it in the theater.
That's how I saw it.
I never saw it in the theater either.
2001 in the theater, you feel like you're the smartest person on the planet.
Oh
like you're the only one that gets it. And
I feel like that every time I listen to the Smiths.
Me too.
The saddest person.
The saddest. And they're speaking right to me. This is me.
I wrote this.
But talking about Star Trek too, it's Star Trek is about it's got some war elements. It's got all of that, but it's really, I think, utopian in the way that you have this future that has no religion. You have this future that has men and women,
no money,
equal. There's no money. Society. It's the socialism, and you see that these that kind of a world where men and women are equal, races are equalized, there's no more fiat money system, and these amazing cities are built, and they're able to, this technology that they embrace. And that was kind of Ray Bradbury. Gene Roddenberry. Not Ray Bradbury, but also Ray Bradbury. But Gene Roddenberry's vision for the original Star Trek was that science would, and his idea, and Carl Sagan said this in Asimov, that science would release us from those things that are keeping us from manifesting the greatness of humanity, which is religion, racism,
gluttony,
greed, hatred. All of those things would be fixed with science. And that's what a lot of those visionaries felt. And that was the hope of that wave of science and science fiction writing, was that, you know, we would have robots and we would have space travel and it would save the world and we would use technology to become better people. And it's interesting that sci-fi goes in those two different directions. It either goes to that utopian place or to a very dark place. Like Oblivion, where the entire species has been destroyed. Or Wall-E, where the entire species has gone to Walmart.
Like Elysium.
Gone to Walmart.
That's
I know, I love it.
Oh, it kind of is.
They do go to Walmart.
They go to Walmart. It's why it's called Wall-E. It's social commentary. Get on the ball.
Rob didn't read his Cliff's Notes.
Somebody didn't read his homework that I sent everyone. But
Oh,
I didn't get mine.
No, I
missed
just sent
that
it to
email.
myself.
Oh, it's
Yeah, the
weird.
email was Sci-Fi as well.
I put it on Jenny's blog.
He sent it straight to Friendster.
And as soon as she figures out the address for it, she can read it.
It's somewhere, I swear.
It's iwentyesterday.blogspot.com.
Yes, and we will make sure to plug that again.
Wait, is it really?
And yes,
Wait,
and we
Yeah,
will,
that's- I think
and we'll be
that's
sure to
actually-
plug it on our sites as well.
Yeah.
So what? Just kind of throwing it out there because I know that as a kid, sci-fi was a big part of my childhood. You know, I was reading the Tolkien books before before the movies, before all of that. When I was a little kid, I really loved that fantasy, and I loved Star Wars was amazing and was a big part of my childhood and those kinds of movies. So, what were some of your earliest memories of science fiction? Because I think
Jim Henson.
Oh yeah, does like Labyrinth?
Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal.
I've never
those
seen
would be
Dark
more like
Crystal.
fantasy, but I think
true.
too. But I think fantasy and sci-fi
Thanks
really
for shooting us down, Jordan.
really
They can
kind
go
of
hand in hand.
go hand in
Yeah.
hand, and they're
Jurassic
part of the same.
Park.
I mean, Jurassic Park is definitely, it's 20 years old. I cannot believe it. I watched it
When
the
we
other
saw the
night.
trailer and they go for the 20th anniversary, I was like, oh my god.
I feel so old. But
20
it's really good.
years old.
I watched it twice recently. It's been on like nonstop.
What's the movie that? What's the movie that you would just die in 20 years? You're like, have to celebrate its 20th anniversary this year. Like it was Spring Breakers, like 20th edition.
The Sapphires. I know I'm going to be there for the 20th anniversary.
Jeez,
Sapphires.
for the remaster.
For the remaster.
Well, when they talk about American Beauty is, what, 10, 15?
17 years.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can remember one from my childhood. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. Explorers. It's like it's
Yeah.
with River Phoenix, Ethan Hawke, and some kid you never see ever again.
Jerry O'Connell.
Oh, wow.
No.
No, he's in that other movie. I remember that movie.
Oh
That's
my
a
god,
good
that movie changed my life as a
Mac
child.
and Me.
Oh, Mac
We
and Me.
tried to
I
forget that.
cried
Bootleg
for Mac and
E.T.
Me.
It was so cute.
But you think about a lot of the
It was
blockbusters
bootleg ET.
for all of us, the 80s.
I was Mexican. That's all I grew up on is bootlegs.
Rob is only Mexican at this podcast. I just want everyone to know. Please. Take off the sombrero.
I picked it up at the flea market.
Hola, choro.
Rug.
But I know that a lot of the blockbusters from the 80s when I was a kid were science fiction, like E.T., Back to the Future. Those were the movies that were really, packing in Star Wars. So those were those movie-going experiences that were really meaningful.
Oh, Dan has a question.
Yes, Dan.
It wasn't. I can wait.
Dan, now we've already interrupted everything.
No, we're here. What
We're
would
here
like
for
to
you,
say?
Dan.
So I just want to kind of throw it out there, and then I'll shut up for the rest of the podcast. Curtis, I'm looking at you. My sci-fi, when growing up as a child, primarily came from comic books, a lot of them. And I just want to make a small note that yesterday morning, it was announced that Glenn Close is going to be playing in the James Gunn movie Guardians in the Galaxy as the leader of the Nova Corps.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, geek vomit right here.
Albert Nobbs?
Yeah.
I don't know what any of that is, but I'm going to look it up.
I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that.
James Gunn doing.
I saw that she was announced.
Well, I know that she's James Gunn's doing this.
There's gonna be raccoon shooting guns.
You know what? When they make
I don't
Fatal
even know who
Attraction 2,
James
call me.
Gunn is. Who's James Gunn?
I know that name.
He did the zombie video game, Zombie Cheerleader video game.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote
That's,
the whole script for
I
that.
remember that,
He
Curtis.
sounds fantastic.
Yeah. We played that while we were waiting for Sex and the City to
I like
start.
Glenn Close. Anything with Glenn Close. I'll
And
listen.
Back into the Darkness. I guess.
Except for Albert Nobbs.
What I was saying. Sorry. The first movie I ever saw was The Abyss. My mom took me to see it when I was a kid, and I remember falling asleep. And
You don't remember being terrified?
I was like, I must have been 5, but my mom trained us to go to the movies. Like when we were little kids, she would
Me
just take
too.
us to the movies, and you learn to shut up and watch it. And sometimes you watch it, sometimes you fall asleep. But I remember falling asleep and waking up when the alien was creating the faces. Remember? And I thought, oh my god, what is this? But yeah, so she took me to that. It must have been a late showing. She probably assumed I'd fall asleep. So there you go, Mom.
She's like, I don't care. I'm going to take these kids with me.
She did. No, she didn't. I remember when she took my little brother to see a movie when he was probably a couple months, and I was like, "Are you serious?" And she's like, "That's how I taught you guys." And it was Castaway, and he slept the whole time
Oh,
because
my.
the water.
It's very soothing when they crash the 747 into the water. When he's taking the shoes off the dead captain, that's real soothing.
Captain Phillips. I dreamed a dream.
So, and I know that, so coming up this summer, we've got some big sci-fi coming out, which will have already come out by the time you hear this.
You might get them on Blu-ray.
But you can get them on...
Or picking them up at the flea market.
You could...
Don't encourage that.
No, I won't encourage that.
you could,
I have a friend who works at a theater.
Oh, I don't.
You don't have any?
No, that's a shit job. I hang out with real people. I'm just kidding.
Where were they this week?
At River Oaks Theater. So
Demolishing it,
at Edward.
picking up the ashes.
I'm just kidding, Rob. I love you. But Man of Steel is coming out, which I really love because Superman, the original Superman. And that's one of the things I watched. I watched Superman 2
Yeah.
a couple of days ago. It is so bad.
Not the Richard Donner.
Not the Richard
version.
Donner cut.
I've never seen the Richard Donner.
It's
the
still
original.
cheesy, but
it's,
yeah.
I mean, it's cheesy. It's so good, but you can't buy Margot Kidder as a romantic lead. I'm sorry.
I do.
You
I love
would.
Margot Kidder.
You would.
Because she's not
You
the
would.
because she's not the typical girly girl that you're like the Kate Bosworth. I mean, come on.
She was
Fuck
terrible.
Kate Bosworth.
Thank you. And somebody like even Amy Adams, I buy her as romantically, but Margot Kidder just seems so left of center that I love that. He's from a
you know
strange
what?
world.
But remember,
she's
He
strange.
when
doesn't
we-
care about beauty.
But when we talked about The Shining, we talked about Shelley Duvall's casting
Was
versus
Jessica Lange.
Cupid doll, Jessica Lange, blonde, bombshell, and that really worked to service
The
that
story.
character and that character's
Margot
character's
just seems
driven.
plucky and spunky.
It's because she's Canadian. She's
that
from
could
the
be it.
Yukon.
You could be it.
What other summer releases, other sci-fi releases are this year?
I saw the trailer for Gravity. Is it Gravity?
We saw it, yeah.
With Sandra Bullock and
Yeah.
George Clooney.
I'm not.
That looked really.
I'll go.
And I went with my boyfriend to see
I hate Sandra Bullock.
to see Star Trek. I went with him the second. I had seen it already, and I went with him to see it for the first time. During that trailer, he was on the edge of his seat because he is a real Star Trek. He's a real sci-fi nerd, and he was just really engrossed in that. So it's just a really good trailer. I don't know if the movie could be shit, but
It's Alfonso Cuarón. This is his first film since Children of Men.
It needs to be in IMAX in 3D. There's no other way I'm going to see that.
it intrigued me. I definitely.
It's the
wanna
same
see it.
director?
Yeah,
Oh, I
but
didn't know
he
that.
went through when they were making that movie. He went through the casting. People were turning him down left and right, and finally he settled on Sandra Bullock. So the part was originally, and this is all in the press. It was offered to Angelina Jolie, who said no. Offered to a couple more people, they all said no. Offered to Natalie Portman, said no. Offered to a couple more. So he just kept trying to give it to people, and finally he's like, Sandra Bullock, what are you doing next week? Do you want to be in my 3D movie? It's going to film for a week, and then I'll do post on it for 2 years. That's
he's
that's kind of what it was. And so I'm not optimistic.
To cover up her bad acting?
Slap that Oscar out of her hand.
Seriously.
Second worst Oscar win. But anyways,
Probably not being the first.
Jennifer Lawrence.
I
being the
absolutely
first.
agree.
Love As Good As It Goes. So
You would.
Well, she shouldn't have won that year, but come on, give it to me. Helena Bonham Carter
Because
could have won.
Jessica Chastain, his sister, should
It's
have
my
won.
cousin.
Oh,
It's my cousin. We're not that close.
We do have some. There are some big sci-fi films coming out this summer. The Purge, which I'm really looking forward to.
Isn't
which
that horror?
It's sci-fi. It's current social trend taken to its extreme. Thank you, Robert Heinlein. And
Hunger Games.
Pacific Rim, which I feel I saw when it was called
Yes.
Godzilla.
I can't wait
No,
for
I
that.
can't
Are you
wait.
serious?
I can't
Why
wait.
do we like
I can't wait to
Guillermo.
not see it.
That's fine. I won't invite you when I screen it.
Unless it's a porn called
I'm
Pacific
not-
Rim, I'm not interested. Okay?
That Asian one.
Yeah, with all those Filipinos.
I just don't like Guillermo del Toro.
I've never seen one do that with a plantain.
They were talking about how
Thank you.
he directed Blade 2, and I was like, oh, I didn't like Blade 2.
Oh, I never saw that.
That's good.
I like Blade 3. But yeah, I never like anything he does. So when Rob was so excited, I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, this looks really good.
Have you ever seen Kronos? Is that how you pronounce it?
No, that's one of his I've not seen.
You
Okay.
have to see that.
It's
He
on
did,
Hulu
he did
Plus.
Mimic too.
I like Mimic.
I've never seen that. He did that?
He did
I had
Kronos,
no
then
idea.
Mimic, I think.
Mm.
Then Blade. Okay, I'll watch Kronos.
Kronos, oh, so good.
I'm a
never
big
seen Kronos either.
I'm a bit completist. If I'm gonna say I don't like it,
Especially if
somebody,
you're
I
into
wanna watch their stuff.
vampires, like, he takes a vampire legend and does something really cool with
Why
it.
is everything else he does so bad?
Hellboy 2 is amazing.
I love Hellboy. Yeah.
I'll go. I'll see anything. I don't care. But I'll groan afterwards, or I'll love it. Who knows?
Who knows?
I like to be surprised.
And the lead actor, Charlie Hunnam.
Was he the guy from Queer as Folk? The
Yes,
original?
yes,
Crazy
that's
Folk,
him. Yeah.
Oh, he can act.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy from Sons of Anarchy, isn't
Yes.
he?
So okay, he's
So
gotten better
hot.
over the years.
Sorry.
He's at least getting paid more.
Yes.
True.
So I looked at you when I made the sound.
I was wondering why you're apologizing. I'm going, what I miss?
Is that the only sci-fi coming out? Okay, so Crimson.
Well, World War Z is also coming out, which I'm feeling about, but I'm
I
gonna
like
see
the
it.
director.
I like
see it.
Mark Forster.
I like
Yeah.
Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt, as of late, has been
I-
doing some good work.
Yeah, for sure, and I'm gonna see it for sure. I know the zombie thing is kind of played out. I feel.
I didn't tell you. I know this is
But do on
Sci-Fi,
air.
but we just found out that we're booked to play the new Almodovar.
Which is called.
I'm so excited.
I am so excited, but what's it called? Who's on first?
Based on
And
second.
scene.
And scene.
Dead air, dead
Insert
air.
clip here. Well, we haven't gotten our hand signals down yet. Also because I'm not paying attention. But,
Jordan's just learning how to wrap it up.
I never wrap it up. I learned
Dirty.
that. I learned that in the Philippines. So anyway,
That means sex, everybody.
for those of you in Iowa, that means sex. That's not a plantain. Anyway, so this has
Where can you
been-
find us online?
We are wrapping this up right now before the censors.
Where
break
can
into
you
the
find
room.
us online?
We are everywhere online. You should find us on Facebook. We're also on YouTube. We're on
Instagram.
Instagram. We're on what else? We're on
Soon the Twitter. We got the Twitter.
We're
Are
on
we
the
twatted?
We're twatting all over.
We will be
all
twatting.
over the greater Houston area. And then of course our fabulous guest tonight, Ginny, with her blog, which is located at Curtis. You said it before.
I want yesterday.blogspot.com.
So check
Thank
that
you.
out.
or just
and
Google search I want yesterday. Come on.
Yeah.
do that, and also
My
like
Nana
her
Googles.
Facebook page,
Oh,
and
yeah.
hopefully all of her fans will like our page, and vice versa. So thanks for joining us, and I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me. Where's my paycheck? I'm kidding. No, really.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Ta-ta.
About the original.
True.
But
There was that pattern,
what,
and there was
if
that
you had read what they were
signature.
doing, is that each of them is meant to be a catch-up of where these characters have been,
Yeah.
leading up to a potential movie. So it's one of those where they're once again taking that gamble as they did in the previous seasons. We're hoping we're going to continue this series.
I would not watch that movie.
I honestly.
I totally would.
Well, I think, and this is an interesting article, I think it was on Hollywood Reporter, I was telling Rob about it. Their pay structure is very curious, and the way Netflix has budgeted them, there's a star of each episode, and that star gets the paycheck. And then if you notice, the other cast members are in it for about 90 seconds. They get a small paycheck just for appearing in the episode. So it's a budget thing. I think that's the way it's structured the way it is, which is kind of sad in a way, but kind of, I guess, how the industry works now.
But
it does make a difference.
It's a different industry. I mean, Netflix is unique in the way it's like they did with House of Cards. They did with what's that horror one?
Hemlock Grove.
It's a new way of approaching a series that doesn't.
And it's interesting to see that there's a double-edged sword with that new production environment.
It's not just total freedom.
That it's not that total freedom can go one way or the other. That, I'm going to finish the episodes, and I will.
I mean, I will. I've got nothing else to watch.
I'm sure I'm going to watch them again after I watch them.
Yeah, I've only watched 3. I just didn't.
I want to like it. I always tell Rob every time we talk about it, I want to like it. I want to think it's the funniest show I've ever seen. I want to tee-hee all the way, but it's just not funny to me, and it's just not my...
Now, are you a fan of the original seasons?
Ish. Like, I liked them. I think they're good. I watched them. I was like, oh, this is funny. Like, this is good. But no, I wasn't like, oh my God, they're coming back. But I watched it, and to me, it's just the same of the old.
I was one of the hardcore, can't wait that it's coming back. I've been posting memes for weeks.
Oh, really?
I have been so excited.
The Bluth a Day.
Bluth a Day. There's an app that you could text one of the characters and they would text you the minute that Netflix released the episodes.
Oh, did they all text you?
Nerd. But I was really disappointed. I don't even think disappointed is the word. I think aghast.
It fell flat.
It was. They jumped the shark, then went back and raped the shark.
I disagree. I don't think they jumped the shark. I don't think they've jumped the shark. I enjoy it.
They ran it over with stair.
But what do you mean by jumped the shark? They took it.
Did somebody slip in the phrase rape culture in there?
No.
Someone has to speak for Brenda. I'm sorry. And I will be that voice.
What do you mean jump the shark, though? Because jump the shark means they've taken it too far. I feel like they're doing the same old shtick they did before.
Well, no, because I think the pattern is different.
The structure.
The
structure is different, but the structure was what was amazing.
I want to continue it, but I'm going to because I love that show so much. But I don't know. Watching 3 was enough for me right now, unfortunately.
Well, and that's probably why they asked everybody not to binge watch it. And again, I don't understand.
Then don't release them that way on Netflix.
Dan, you never have an opinion.
I know, right? But no, as a guy who watched the entire thing because I'm fat and lazy, I got to episode 7. And I know that's like the cool thing to say. Episode 7's when it got better. But seriously, that's when it got better. It gets better, guys.
Thank you for telling me now.
Out of high school.
But wait, Dan, is that when the characters start really coming together as an ensemble? Because that's when it started to work.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when kind of everybody does their first episode, and then you really start understanding why there's a big time gap. I guess everything kind of goes back in time and then forward in time.
Yeah.
And you start seeing them interact as a family, which is why the show works. Is because not one of them are a solid lead. All together is a perfect show.
Yep. Jason Bateman. He's a solid lead. He's your character that you watch.
But you notice without the ensemble, he turns into a total douchebag.
What?
But you didn't notice when he was
does.
immersed in the ensemble.
Because he's not the douchebag. He's the guy who's trying to save everything. Oh, that does make sense.
So
it's like watching a half an hour of Jack
That makes
and
me
Karen.
sad.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, just look at the
much.
relationship. Sorry, we're
Yeah, go
talking over each other unintentionally. What else?
I know that one thing I watched.
A woman's perspective. So I decided to write a blog based off of the Natalie Wood quote. It's someone asked her, what do you want? What do you need today? And she said, I want yesterday. And that was right before she died. So I thought it was somber.
It's a somber tone. We appreciate that.
What she needed was swimming lessons.
Oh,
No, it is not too soon for Natalie Wood. I'm sorry. What Wood doesn't float?
it was 30
Natalie
years
Wood.
ago.
Was it only 30 years ago?
30 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
30 years, yeah.
That's so weird.
I know what she's talking about on her blog tonight. Misogyny, the podcast.
I meant this homosexual, and what he said just.
Who's gay?
Oh, yes, that's right.
You know
So we
it.
are here tonight. So we are very glad to have Jenny tonight, and we'll.
Thank you, Jenny, for coming.
Thank you.
We will try to be nice and not run you out. Screaming and yelling halfway through. So before we get started,
we'll just edit it.
That's true. We'll dub in.
Have we've learned? Yeah.
But before we start with tonight's featured topic, what has everyone been up to?
Well, I think we've all pretty much have caught a little bit of the new Arrested Development season.
Yes.
Yes, I have.
Yes, and like herpes, it's hard to cure. Really uncomfortable.
Sad.
The history of evolution has taught us that life will not be contained. Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but, well, there it is. There it is.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
And that was a clip from 1993's Jurassic Park. This is Jordan, and this is Movies the Podcast, and tonight I'm joined by...
Curtis.
Rob.
Jenny.
And our ever-amazing producer, Stan, Dan the Man.
Jackie Chan.
This is Jackie Chan.
That's racist. You'll fit in nicely here. So we are joined tonight by Ginny in place of Brenda. Brenda is not with us tonight, so we give a shout out to her. And,
She's a little under the weather, so hopefully she gets... Oh, by the time this airs, she'll be...
Hopefully she's better by the time this airs.
We were gonna have Jenny anyways.
Yeah.
We lucked out.
We adopted her.
Yeah.
But Ginny is here, and Ginny is bringing an interesting perspective on movies. She's the writer of a blog called I Went Yesterday, which focuses on women in film. Ginny, can you tell us a little bit about your blog and what you write?
I just feel like there's not enough information out there about women in film from a